guys, what's happening? It's Ike from Flipside Music, and welcome to F.A.Q. What the F.A.Q? Season 2, episode 32, right? I think 32. Episode 32. We realized that we are going to do season 2 until the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
And then season 3 will be next year.
That way it has no connection to 2020.
Right. So we're getting out of that. So if you guys are new here, new subscribers or anything like that, it's a question and answer show, weekly thing that we do. You throw us in some questions and we give you an answer. It could be music related. It could be not music related. As long as we keep it away from politics and religion, just like at the bar, we're all good.
Yes.
We're all good. So, let's just jump right in. You want to go with the first question?
Sure. Got another one from Colin James, who definitely had the most interesting question last week.
Yeah.
The the fantasy band that's currently alive doing a cover song. So that was a fun one. He says he's looking for a chorus. He says he's currently using the Moore Ensemble King, which is okay. But he says he'd like something that can also hit the 80s flavor as well as some more interesting modulation. He says right now he's looking at the Fender Bubbler or the Seymour Duncan Catalina.
Okay.
I don't know if I've tried the Catalina, so I can't say I'm super familiar with that one.
Yeah, I haven't.
The Bubbler I'm pretty familiar with.
The Bubbler is good. I would say also the the Boss.
Well, the CE2 would definitely, the reissue would hit that spot for sure, and I think it would be in a similar range as the Bubbler. The Bubbler might be a little bit more affordable, but
they're in the ballpark. Yeah. And then what's the other one? The
honestly, even use Julia would be a good one.
I think that's covered. That's going to cover that 80s vibe plus much more.
Well, speaking of vibe, it actually does have a vibrato mode to it, so you would have another flavor other than just chorus.
Yeah. And the Juliana is the updated one. It's the next version, let's say.
Yeah, that one you got to be pretty committed to chorus, but that one is a lot of fun. That one's stereo and tap tempo, but it's in a different bracket. But yeah, I would definitely throw the Julia out there. Honestly, if you want something weird, the C Machine from Earthquaker 2 is another one that's worth throwing in that mix.
Probably just going 80s chorus, though.
You can get the C Machine, if you dial it back, get it to do that. It definitely takes on more of almost like what Nico listens to with some of the alt stuff. It takes on more of that kind of a chorus, the 80s English alt kind of chorus sounds.
All my favorite stuff.
Oh yeah.
I would go honestly, personally. I would say if you wanted to, the Boss is a pretty good choice.
Yeah, basically 3/4, I think, of almost all choruses trace back to the CE2 anyway.
So kind of get into origin stuff.
Yeah. All
right. So next, Driddle asks, "What underrated piece of gear do you think every player should have?" So underrated piece of gear every player should have.
Speaking of Nico, underrated piece of gear that everyone should. There's probably quite a few out there. The one that comes to mind right now that I feel like is a more recent thing is parallel pedals, like the tri-parallel mixer, or even switcher units that allow you to run things in parallel. Because I think running fuzz and distortion and other flavors in parallel, or even modulation in parallel rather than running them into each other, is a lot of fun. I don't know. I think it's an underrated thing that not a lot of people explore yet. But
yeah, and I like that answer because that's a good. Because I've thought about the tri-parallel mixer myself. Because that way it's hey, I can kind of run this one thing could be. I think I've mentioned it before. Hey, you could kind of have a clean country thing, a little bit of compression, that kind of thing, and then hey, this is more of my bluesy thing. This is more of another thing. Yeah. It's all kind of in its own. It's all.
Rather than all you're smashing into each other.
Yeah, taking things on and taking things off to make it work.
Right.
I like that idea.
Yeah, because blending pedals, especially phase and delay, is one of my favorite ones if you run them in parallel rather than running them into each other. Because everything's just a lot cleaner. You hear the phase and it continues to move the way that it should without getting messed up by the delays, and then the delays aren't conflicting with the phase. So I feel like that one's the spot right now.
So for me, underrated piece of gear I think is every player should have. That's a tough one, to be honest. I think I'm going to go with the standard. My safe answer was just a pedal tuner. Would probably be the because it's not sexy.
No, and it is shocking how many people still try to rely on clip-on tuners. Yeah, because I feel like we still run into people we have to assure that a pedal tuner is a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most underrated.
Yeah,
or that's what I would pick is a pedal tuner. Just getting a nice pedal tuner, like the Boss one is good.
Honestly, a good stand. That's the other one, because people just put shit everywhere. They just lean it on stuff. Like, just get a good folding stand.
Where is it? We don't have it. The Reunion Blues. Yeah. Reunion Blues has a nice stand with the flappy bits that hold it nice.
Well, yeah, it'll conform to any headstock shape.
And it leans on. I got 3 or 4 of those at home, and it's great because it's very stable, and especially if you have dogs that are like mine.
Yeah.
Mr.
Spazzy Dave.
Yeah, Dave's a little crazy. So it works really well because if he gets a little squirrely,
yes,
it's a good idea.
No,
instead of the cheap and inexpensive, because I've busted, I've broken guitars because of having a cheap stand.
Yeah.
So that's a good one too. I'd say stands.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's something too, again, that falls into like the category of people don't want to buy them, but I feel like it's definitely necessary, and most people don't take that too seriously.
And if we're going to go accessories, I would always say too is strap locks.
Yeah.
If you're somebody that plays, if you're somebody that gigs, and if you're somebody that plays standing up a lot, it's a smart idea to have just a set of strap locks. Some, whatever that may be, it could be the Dunlop set, it could be Shaler set.
Yeah, even like those rubber
ones from Fender.
Yeah,
that's what I use.
Yeah, I use those on like my Barrington because my Barrington's my only like vintage guitar. So it's like it's the only one I don't want to really mess with in terms of taking the hardware off. So that one I just use the regulars, and it's been fine. It's actually been pretty great using those.
I use those because they're cheap, and you can just buy a few of them and throw them in your in your bug out.
Worst thing that happens, you just replace it after a couple of years if it gets too brittle or something.
Yeah. So all right. Okay, moving on. We got P. Fritzed bass. Oh, I know who that is. That's Patrick.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm like, bass.
Where's the bass talk?
Yeah, it's got to be Patrick. Where's the bass talk? Actually, talk about the differences between the different pick options for a guitarist and bassist. There's personal preference, but what are the basics about choosing a good pick?
This is interesting because I feel like, there's always, among bass players, there's always the civil war of finger picking versus picks.
Right.
But one interesting pick that I feel like comes up for bass that never ever comes up for guitar are those weird furry ones.
The
felt picks. Yeah,
felt picks. Yeah. Those give it definitely a different tone.
Yeah, and I mean, as you would expect, it is a softer attack as it should be.
I think the felt picks are going to give you more, from what I've kind of seen, it's more of a feel of a finger. It has that more sense. Muted, kind of mellower, warmer kind of
less bright
feel to it.
Yeah. So, that makes sense because, I mean, to me, like Ultex picks, or the material Ultex, is closer to like the fingernail. So guys that tend to pick with their fingernails more, or even, like a lot of, you do it a lot too. Yeah. You like do a lot of the downstrokes with the top part of your fingernail. If you like that sound, then I think like Ultex is the closest you can get to that sound.
It gives you that sharp attack, that
little
snap, bite, snap to it. Yeah. As far as other picks, I mean, I usually use mostly the Tortex. For the most part, I use the Tortex Dunlop ones.
Well, I feel like a lot of bass players that come in here also still stick to those for the most part. A lot of the guys, though, too, those giant triangle picks, I guess I get those just because it gives you a little more surface, and you get three edges. So, because, bass players do definitely run through their picks quicker, or at least chew through them quicker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say, most, at the end of the day, it's just personal preference. You do have to just try a bunch of them before you can really figure out. But I do feel like bass players as a whole use some odd picks compared to guitar players.
Yeah, and thickness of picks is all going to depend on your personal preference. I also the style you're playing and what you're playing. I know some of the metal guys like to go really thick because they can really do that percussive thing.
Well, then it's just
that's what Nico likes. You like the
low 1.5s.
Yeah, so one. See, the one
what I use is crazy. Yeah, even like the Ultex jazzes that I use are, I think, 1.5. So to me, like what happens with those two is like, especially if you do a lot of alternate picking, I know it sounds dumb, but because it is thicker, it lessens some of that distance you're traveling, and everything just feels a little smoother. Whereas like the thinner the pick gets, it feels like it'll start to throw you if you're used to it.
So it go along with that. Like I like a 1 millimeter. That's usually what I use. That's kind of where I live.
Yeah.
Now, but I used to start with thinner picks, and then I kind of realized that's a nice spot for me to be. But then I also realize that if I'm playing like my acoustic or I'm doing something that's more strummy, then I'll go with a lighter pick.
Yes, I do
because
that
I
too.
want to have that flexibility in the pick. And I don't want that stiffness.
Well,
so,
and I think
that's something to kind of work with too.
I think some of that also comes from how we personally pick, because I'm the same way, exactly the same way with that. Like if I'm doing any strummy bits or even funkier type stuff, if I'm trying to mess with that, I think a thinner pick is a lot better off.
Yeah, I like the flexibility.
But I think I've also met guys that are very, I'm not being mean, but they're just smaller guys that aren't
wee lads.
Yeah, they're not as aggressive in how they pick, so they tend to all go the other way. They use heavier picks for the strummier bits because they got to work less. They don't have to work as hard. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I think that's enough pick talk, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, moving on.
This one's from Mr. Chris Barchi.
Barchi, what's up,
Chris? He's asking about $100 overdrives, JHS 3 Series versus the EQD Plumes. I sort of talked to him about this one already, but I think it's a great question because both of them are actually pretty different, and I think a lot of people were expecting them to be pretty similar.
Yeah, I was going to say they seem to me. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with either one of them, but I've played both of them. But they're definitely a little bit of a different animal. Yeah,
well, I did a demo for the Plumes, and through my high watt, I actually really loved how that sounded. That one was pretty awesome. The JHS is very different. Like I feel like the Plumes is much more aggressive in terms of like the attack and even just like the feel. Whereas is that UPS or something? Customer interrupts us. Anyway, so the JHS one though, I'm actually in the middle of doing a demo for in mode 2, the one that's more saturated but has a little less volume. That one very much feels like a treble booster to me. It actually seems very similar to the Naga. So that one, to me personally, because I already have the Naga and another treble booster, that I would probably go towards the EQD Plumes personally. But I think both of them are pretty amazing for the money, and I honestly wish they'd been out like 10 years ago. Because it's like I feel like I would have had probably both of them at this point if they'd been around then.
And I know it sounds terrible, but yeah, I would kind of agree. They both do different things, and if I wanted to have both of them, I think if you wanted to have both of them, you wouldn't be disappointed.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on what. Well, yeah, it definitely depends on what tone you're going after. Right. I think the Plumes, if it was for me.
Well, the Plumes can hit like this almost plexi-ish kind of breakup. Yeah. Whereas like the JHS one, like mode 1 is very clowny. It's very, sorry, we got all kinds of things ringing up.
This is going to be the last one.
But yeah, we have like with the JHS one, mode 1 is very claw-esque. Kind of reminded me of the Archer, a lot cleaner, a lot more headroom, whereas mode 2 was like the Naga. So I felt like that one was definitely a lot closer to a treble booster. So if you don't have either of those flavors, right, that one's a great one.
Because I would lean, if I had to pick one, I would probably lean more toward the JHS. That's me.
Yeah, and I'd say that one
because that hits some things I don't have.
In the same way I would go.
Right, in the Plumes, I have stuff that kind of does that already. Right. So that's where I would go. So I think either or, you're going to be safe. It kind of depends on what style of play you're after. You know?
And bang for the buck, they're both amazing. Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't fault either one of them for anything. It's just a matter of which personal flavor do you want.
Right. All right. Do we got room for one more? Or what time is it? What do we got for time?
Time check. 2? Yeah, I think we're okay.
All right. So this is an easy one. Last question comes from Headwop26, which we know who that is. It's Mr. Jake.
He's got a shift tomorrow.
Yeah, he'll be here tomorrow. Yeah. So he says, outside of the pentatonic scale, what scale do you play in the most? The pentatonic scale.
I play in a made-up scale because
I don't like rules, man.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like to conform to people's ideas of scale. No. I'm honestly still trying to get personally, I feel like I'll always be working on getting a good grasp of the pentatonic. It's like, can you ever really really run out of stuff to do? I mean, because it still ended up being the basis of most things. So it's like,
right. And to be honest, like as I learn and do more with other modes and stuff, everything that I try to learn that's different is all based on because I've just played the pentatonic so much. Well, because I feel being a blues player, that's kind of where you are.
Well, it's a gateway to the other scale. So it's like to me, it's like you're never really done there. It's kind of like you never forget to basic sentence structures the same way you never forget pentatonics.
When you make bread, you kind of use yeast for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of one of those things that it's part of almost every scale. I mean, the major scale, but the pentatonic seems to run. It's a pretty. It runs through just about everything, and that's the way. Depending on how the chord progression is, I would say for me, if I got to go outside the Mixolydian mode, kind of ends up being that way for me. And Ionian, I think, but it's only like bits and pieces because sometimes I'm like, oh, I know I could do this little deal here and put the 7 in there, and that actually works, and it makes it sound a little bit more this way or a little bit more that way. Yeah. But everything for me, I think mostly in pentatonics because it's like home base. It works basically for everything.
Yeah. I would say outside of pentatonic, at least from the lessons I had with Dave before he left, I tended to apparently have an ear for like the Phrygian. So like even though I don't have like a real firm grasp on it.
Oh, so you're like all the cool kids in the
apparently
in the chat.
But he was just saying,
like, you got playing dad blues licks.
Well, the discussion came up. The discussion mainly came up because I struggle with, like, to me, I love blues. I love blues phrasing, but it doesn't just naturally like spill out of me. Whereas like the Phrygian, like if you give me, even if it's just one, more or less one box of the Phrygian, like for some reason I tend to be able to write stuff in that spot easier. So for me, he thought I had an ear for the Phrygian, whereas
the weirdest one of all of them.
Probably, yeah. Well, I like the Eastern. I kind of it has that Eastern vibe, and I don't know, it just clicks easier, I guess.
Typical Viking.
Yeah, being all weird.
This one sounds like pillaging.
Yeah.
I think I shall play it more.
Phrygian, pillaging. Yeah,
that's close, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for questions.
Yeah.
You got any questions?
How you guys keep it up every day? So gosh darn easy.
It ain't easy, but it ain't easy being great.
I know we make it look easy, but
this takes a lot of work.
Man. Oh yeah,
I believe it. Takes a lot of work. All right, we got to roll. Everything's started.
All right, everything's beeping.
Everything's going off. There are people at the door. There's hordes of people at the door. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. If you're new and you're still here, which you probably are, hit the subscribe button. Hit the smash the like button. Hit the little ring bell thing and all that stuff. And we'll be here next week.
Yes. Yeah, we got this coming out, and we got 2 more demos in the works, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we got a cool one coming in for KSR.
Yes.
And are we doing a live one next week? I think we might be doing a live FAQ on Saturday next week, so tune into that. All right, we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
Yeah!